Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Wars Andor Season 2. This video, I will review or quickly cover Season 2 of Andor, so I have to start with a spoiler warning. For all of Season 2 of Andor, if you haven't seen it, you won't want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So I wasn't planning on doing this video, so I'm just coming on real quick to talk about it because I had some thoughts that I wanted to get across from this show. So those who have seen my video on Season 1 of Andor, which that video was called, Season 1 of Andor is overrated. So you know my feelings about it. Season 1, I think people hyped it up way too much. I think it's probably the second most overrated season of all time, behind Westworld Season 1. But anyway, so my feelings on Season 1 is that it was 12 episodes long, and I feel like it should have been 6. I felt like it had a lot of unnecessary storylines, a lot of unnecessary characters. It was boring at times. It was way too slow paced, and it just had unnecessary episodes, and I think they could have cut it in half and told a better story. Now, I did say at the end of my review for Season 1 that I heard that the original plan was to do 4 seasons, but that they're condensing 3 seasons worth of story into 1 season because they're only going to do 1 more season, Season 2. And I said for that I was hoping it would be better because of that. Because the main issue with Season 1 is that it just dragged it out way too unnecessarily long. So I thought, well, if they're being forced to condense their storytelling, then it might be better. And my conclusion is that it was indeed better. Without having a lot of unnecessary storylines and unnecessary characters and just drawn out boring stuff. They were forced to get straight to the point. However, that being said, I still had an issue with the pacing this season. I think the pacing was still off, unfortunately. They could have done a better job. Not that don't have the same complaint as Season 1. I'm not saying that they should have condensed it into 6 episodes. I think 12 was good, but they just didn't pace it very correctly. So the first thing I'll say is because they had a gimmick, which was an interesting gimmick, where they would do 3 episode slots, and between each 3 episodes there'd be a time jump of a year. So they go a year in the future, each 3 episodes. And I've heard a lot of people complaining about this format, saying that sometimes they felt disorientated because a lot of stuff happened off screen that you had to just take for granted. Overall, I didn't have an issue with that. Overall, there's some caveats to that, though. In the main one, I'll just get it out of the system, just say it right up front. The first arc of the 3 episodes should have been 1 episode. That should have been condensed into 1 episode. And then the third arc, the BBY 2, that should have been 5 episodes. They should have slashed those first 2 episodes of the first arc and transplanted them into the third arc. And I know it was like, oh, but they had this format. The perfect format was 3 episodes in the year, 3 episodes in the year. Yeah, I mean, you don't need to stick to gimmicks like that. If it makes more sense for the storytelling, which it does, quite frankly, you should have skipped it. Now, getting into that first arc of 3 episodes, all those storylines could have been condensed into 1 episode. I'm sorry, but they could have. We don't need, scenes of the Mon Mothma's daughter getting married. We don't need a long scene of her husband giving a speech, because we don't even give a fuck about her husband overall, and we don't really know her daughter, so why are we spending all this time on him giving a speech and them hiking up to the mountain, or most importantly of her dancing at a rave in the wedding. Now I get what they were going for, of but she's, having to put on this act and pretend like she's having fun, where, Luthen just said that he's gonna execute her childhood friend, and she has to, isn't that, dark that she has to drink and dance while her friend's being killed or whatever, but you still could have condensed that into one episode. 100% you could have. There was a lot of unnecessary that dragged out way too long, and the whole storyline with Andor being trapped on Yavin with the two different rebel cells who are like fighting each other. Snip. We don't need it. Just cut that out entirely. It is unnecessary. And I know, again, some people will be like, oh no, but you gotta show that the rebellion isn't getting along at first, and then later in the show it shows that they have cohesion. Yeah, you can do that without spending 2 episodes in an unnecessary storyline. You can easily. In fact, they kind of got that across already in season 1. This is kind of redundant, and it was a waste of time. We didn't need it. Just that first scene with Andor and the person who worked for the Empire, like helping him steal the ship, that was a great scene. So that was a great way to open the season, and I was hooked. But then, yeah, the whole shit with him getting stuck on a planet, I'm like, oh, like they could have just snipped, get rid of that whole thing. And again, like the storyline with them, with the other people, Bix and the others being on the planet, with the the farming planet being basically being illegal immigrants of working agriculture who are being mistreated, which is a very poignant, especially now, very poignant commentary to make, very poignant storyline. But it still could have been, that could have been smushed. Everything, it could have been smushed into one episode. And of course, I'll get into my biggest complaint, which is Cyril. I never want to fucking see Cyril's mother again. My whole thing about season 1 is that Cyril was an unnecessary character. Every time he came on screen, I was like, why the fuck are we wasting our time? Now, I know some people might be like, oh, but he had a great arc this season. Mark, how can you say he was a waste of time? Alright, so I'll get to that later, but yes, I did like his arc. We didn't need this bullshit with his mother. We didn't need all the bullshit scenes, especially in season 1, with him drinking blue milk and his mother being a dick to him. I couldn't believe, like, I watched this review of the first 3 episodes, and they're like, oh, this is my favorite scene when Cyril's mother came, and he was complaining, and Dedra had to sort of put her in her place, and all those. I was like, really? That's your favorite scene of those 3 episodes? It's easily the worst. It was like nails in the chalkboard. Like, get the fuck rid. Like, don't even have his mother in the show anymore. Like, Jesus Christ, how can anyone say that was their favorite scene? It blew my mind. Like, they really should have gotten rid of it. So, yeah, so this what I did like in those first 3 episodes was the whole scene with Dedra and Krennic showed up, and they were like, hey, we need this mineral on this planet that's like a respectable core world planet, so we can't just go in there and take it without causing trouble, so we gotta like destabilize it. We need to run propaganda campaigns, and that is very poignant. I've always been interested in propaganda and its use, and so the way that they were like, oh yeah, we need to create a rebel faction there that we can count on to do the wrong thing. Like, I'll get more into that later, but that whole scene was amazing. I did like that, but you still definitely could have squeezed that into one episode. Now, the second arc, I don't have as much to say about that because I liked that arc. That arc was fine. I really wouldn't change it. I think it was a good setup for Gorman. It was interesting. Actually, Cyril was actually interesting for once. Having him sort of play the part. That, to be fair, in the Cyril and Dedra thing, I did kind of like the relationship. And it was interesting that, season 2 began with them together, which was a huge, jump that happened in between. But I like that. And I went with it, and I think the fact that she was kind of using him, but he was like, oh, would you think less of me if I said this is the greatest day of my life? But he didn't really actually know, what they were planning, and that they were planning on basically wiping out the Gorman, and so that was a very interesting setup. The whole thing with Andor and Bix sort of being in a kind of purgatory in their safe house, and how she was, suffering from PTSD, and ended with them actually killing the guy that tortured her, and then of course Andor going off to Gorman and all that stuff. I mean, it was a little slow paced, but I did like it, and so I liked all the setup and that. So the next arc was, to me, the best of the show. This is what really blew me away. But this is the arc that should have been more episodes. Because the one, as much as I did love this arc so much, I feel like they could have expanded on this. We could have gotten more. The one thing that I think that did seem a little bit jarring, and this is the most when I heard people complain about the format of skipping a year. I was okay with that, but I think the one thing that I didn't think was earned was Cyril. It seemed like he jumped straight from being completely on the Gorman side and very upset with what the Empire was doing. I mean, here's the thing, he didn't know what they were planning on doing, but he knew that they were up to no good. He knew that they were trying to root out rebels. I mean, granted, he thought they were just trying to get the outside influences, but he knew he was deceiving them when he was talking to them, so he wasn't completely innocent. And it seemed like a jump for him to be so angry where he's choking Dedra for when he found out what was actually going on. So I feel like that needed to be earned a bit, and I think they could have done that with more episodes. And also, because we had one episode that set everything up, and then we had the episode with the Gorman Massacre, and then we had the whole breaking Mon Mothma out of the Senate, which, by the way, my favorite episode of the season was actually the one when they broke Mon Mothma out of the Senate. That was so intense, so good. But I feel like we needed more. We need to spend more time on Gorman, setting up the massacre, and so I think you should have cut that first arc to one episode and added 2 episodes to this arc to set it up properly, to sort of get Cyril's storyline and make more sense, spend more time setting up the Gorman Massacre. Also, you can spend more time after the Gorman Massacre. So the Gorman Massacre, that, because we knew what was coming. And I didn't realize that this was mentioned in Rebels until I watched some videos. And in fact, in the Rebels episode, I went back and rewatched the Rebel episode with, when Mon Mothma escaped. So it was pretty much taking place directly after episode 9. And of course, the tone's totally different. So it's a cartoon. So it's a little weird watching it back to back like that. But it was still really interesting. But in that episode, she did mention the Gorman Massacre. I'm not a big Star Wars geek, so I did not remember that at all. I do remember when I first saw it, I was like, what is she talking about? What Gorman was? What is this massacre? I just assumed it was some random massacre. But it was great actually getting to see it. And again, the way that they used propaganda. It's very poignant. So there's a lot of commentary, I've heard a lot of things thrown about with, Goebbels and other historical examples of propaganda, dictatorships using propaganda to deflate. In fact, that is the great thing about this show. It is taking this very fantastical fictional setting, but sort of basing it in reality more of what happens in real life when dictatorships, basically, and authoritarian regimes, and the way it destabilizes. So it sees a mineral that it wants, so it comes up with propaganda. And there's so many examples throughout history, recent history even. You could look at the Iraq War. U.S. wanted to control the oil, so they came up with all this propaganda and purposely misled people to think Iraq had something to do with 9/11, and other propaganda about, we're freeing them, we're rescuing them, we're freeing them, and they didn't give a shit about that. They weren't actually doing that. But if I'm a bit political right now, and I'm going to be honest and upfront, even if it upsets some people, but to me, the political commentary that came to mind, especially in episode 9, when Mon Mothma made her speech about the Gorman massacre and how it was genocide, and when she called it out for what it actually was, which it actually was genocide, she got booed, jeered, everyone was yelling at her. So yeah, no, sorry, it did remind me too much of the current situation in Gaza. It really did. In fact, the whole thing about using propaganda, the fact that anyone who speaks out against the genocide that is going on will be termed as anti-Semitic, and in common political discourse in the U.S., it's almost political suicide. It's the fact that Mon Mothma was the only one willing to speak up kind of remind me of Rashida Tlaib was the only one who really spoke up in the Senate. I mean, later Bernie Sanders and others joined, but at first it was just her, and she was deemed, censured by the fucking Congress for doing so, for calling out genocide for what it was. But it also sort of goes in, it began with Mon Mothma, but because of that, she spoke out, more people joined, which is what happened, but it's still the amount of propaganda attacking people, calling out the genocide for what it is, and that led people, because the whole thing is the Empire saw something it wanted. The substance, the mineral or whatever it needed for the Death Star. So they worked backwards, and they helped this insurgency form. They funded it, kind of lifted up this insurgency so they could use it as an excuse to commit this genocide and put out the propaganda saying, well, they deserved it. Just like Netanyahu fucking funded Hamas to get them stronger, and once Hamas attacked, they could be like, oh, well, we got no choice, we got to go in and take this territory, which is exactly what they wanted. They have territory, we want it, how do we get rid of them? Let's first of all throw out all this propaganda, and then let's fund this violent insurgency, and then when they strike out, that's the excuse we need to wipe out all the civilians. Which I'm sorry, and I know it might piss people off, but it's the truth. And this is exactly, and I'm not going to hide it. This is exactly what I was thinking when I was watching this episode. Because absolutely 100% is what's going on in Gaza. So, I mean, it's not a one-to-one analogy, obviously. Because obviously Hamas is much, much worse than the Gormans ever were. Like, they actually did commit pretty bad atrocities, whereas the Gorman resistance didn't. So I'm not saying it's a one-to-one analogy, but it was so similar. It's so similar, the way that they use propaganda, the way that they purposely held up and supported this insurgency in order to use them as an excuse to go in and wipe everyone out. So yeah, sorry. There's just way too many parallels to that to keep silent. I've heard other people compare it to all these other situations, which I'm sure is accurate, absolutely 100%. But no, this is obvious. this one is very obvious. So I loved it. This episode, I thought it was so powerful, particularly Mon Mothma's speech, her speaking up, and all. It was a great way to sort of ramp up the tension, to really, build the excitement, and then having Andor and Mothma finally meet with him rescuing her was so good. So yeah, it was my favorite episode of the whole show. I thought it was amazing. So getting to the final arc. This one didn't wow me as much, and I thought, if I'm being honest, it's a little disappointing. And coming after that one, and some bad pacing is involved. Because the episode that begins with Luthen getting caught in his death, like, that was pretty intense. But did we need flashbacks from this character that we barely know? Like, basically, so this is the third to last episode of the entire show, called Andor, and we're spending this third to last episode with where Andor doesn't appear at all, and the whole episode is about this minor character who we barely know. Now, granted, you could say, well, it's actually about Luthen, sure, but he's not the main character of this episode. It's his assistant, and we don't really know her that well. And yeah, sure, it's important. He's an important character. It's important to spend time on his death. But again, and under different circumstances, this might be a really powerful, really good episode. But again, in the condensed season, when you need to get to the point, and you're having a 3-episode arc that's a final arc, and you're spending 1/3 of that arc on an episode that doesn't even have Andor in it, in a show called Andor, I'm sorry, but that's bad pacing. I mean, I did like the episode, especially the start was super intense, but then it dragged once they start to get into the flashbacks, and she went into the hospital, which was good, but again, it dragged on for too long. This should have been intercut with shit going on with Andor that we needed. I think we need to spend more time with Andor, and because one of the key friendships of Rogue One is Andor and K2SO. And he's barely in the show. They only have him in the last 2 episodes. At the very least, they could have had him in 3 episodes. Like, is that too much to ask? I don't think so. And yeah, I just think I think they needed to do more with Andor to set up where he gets to with Rogue One. And also, I think they needed to do more with Mon Mothma. We barely got anything from her in this arc. Basically, she was only in the last episode, and she was doing the same thing she was doing in Rogue One, being like, oh, well, I don't want to really do what obviously needs to be done because I'm going to be, like, having that whole Rebel Council be like, oh, I don't believe you, blah, blah. That seemed like, I don't know. It seemed contrived. Like, I didn't really buy it. Because here's the thing, like, they could, and the whole time I was thinking, like, they should be aware that of this thing that the Empire people put out about, oh, we're looking for this woman who is she's got this plague and she's highly contagious. Like, and as soon as they know that, they would be like, oh, they're doing everything in their fucking power to find her. So clearly she knows something, and what she knows is important, and they're desperately trying to get her. Like, these these morons should be aware of that. And the whole thing about, oh, I don't know if I really believe this. Like, that just kind of bothered me. It seemed like contrived stakes. But don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I didn't like these episodes. I absolutely did. There were some, like I said, the whole thing with Luthen when he first, Dedra first caught up to him. Like, that scene was gold. It was like a Quentin Tarantino-esque scene. It was so good. And the other aspects when Andor came to rescue the assistant, that was super intense, and then having K2SO save them by just drawing people around like that was awesome. That was a really intense scene, good scene. But then the final episode I thought was a little bit disappointing. To me, that had way too much prequel-itis. And something that someone pointed out to me is that this show is basically a prequel of a prequel. And that never felt more poignant and more obvious than in that last episode. It kind of had a Revenge of the Sith feel to it in terms of, oh, we gotta set this up. And like, I didn't even remember. I've only seen Rogue One a couple times. I don't remember what happened. Like, when they said, oh, this guy is calling you and from this planet. And you're supposed to go like, hey, that's the guy from Rogue One who we saw in the first scene. Oh. But I haven't seen that movie enough to know that shit. Like, I kind of figured it out from the context clues, but still, it's like, it felt like, oh, look at this. We're setting up for Rogue One. And I'm like, it's not even that good of a movie, to be honest. And that's always been a hampering for me enjoying this show overall. So after I finished watching season 2 of Andor, I did go straight into watching Rogue One to see how that lined up. And there's a huge tonal difference in terms of, and I'm just going to go right out and say it, Rogue One is not as good as Andor, the show. It is not. It's the character development is way too fast. I don't really know or care about any of the characters, including Andor and Jyn Erso. I think there's too many characters. And I don't buy the camaraderie. I like the fact that, Andor seemed like he was almost going to kiss Jyn Erso at the end, and he was like making eyes at her, and they like hugged, and he was like, "Oh, Jyn!" Like he was desperately wanting to save her. Like, that was unearned. Like, everything was unearned. And there's other two random dudes that just showed up halfway through the movie and just joined them for no good reason. Like, and that stupid pilot, like, his characteristic is he's a pilot. Like, it was just very bad at character building, and it felt a bit more goofy in tone than Andor did. It's funny because when it first came out, everyone was like, oh, this has a much more serious, much more dire and realistic tone than Star Wars, which comparatively speaking it does, but then compared to Andor, it's almost like goofy and silly. I don't know. So the fact that they're trying so hard to match it to Rogue One, and also I didn't mention the thing about that Force sensitive healer or whatever who said, oh, you're a messenger. To me that was major prequelitis, like, because he's getting the message of the Death Star plans. I don't fucking get it. But I did kind of like the whole thing with Bix and how because they set it up perfectly. She's like, we need to win. Like, we need to win. And the fact that she'd be willing to leave him because he doesn't want him to give up. And he's like, look, if you give up, I have nothing I can do about it, but I don't want it to be because of me. And so she leaves, and because she knows they need to win, and she also believes in the faith healer, or the Force healer. I do think that maybe they should have set up her belief in the Force more in season 1 and maybe at the start of the season to make that moment with the Force hero a bit more believable. As it stands, it did seem kind of to come out of nowhere, but I do like the ultimate thing. And the ending the show was showing her with Andor's child. I was going to say son, but I don't know if they specified the sex. But there's theories out there. I've heard theories that is in fact Poe Dameron. I think that would be really cool if that was the case, but I don't know. That is just something wild, speculation. But no, I did think that was, at least that part of it was a powerful way to end. And of course, there's other strong messages. This is a quick review, so I can't get into everything. But there's other strong storylines, such as calling her Degra, but that's the guy from Enterprise Season 3. I think her name is something else. But whatever her name is, her storyline, how she ends up in prison. Yeah. So, and because she spent her whole life like trying to please the Empire, and then she got nothing out of it because they're an evil regime. And that other dude, the Qyburn from Game of Thrones, how he ended up just shooting himself in the head. Like, so there were strong arcs, and also the whole Luthen thing about how he knew it was going to end badly, and he's not really a good guy, but he made everything possible for the rebellion to exist. So, yeah, there's a lot of powerful moments. But here's what I'll say about the show of Andor overall, both seasons as a whole. There's a saying, popular saying, is that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And for Andor, I actually think it's like the reverse. I think the sum of its parts is greater than the whole. And let me explain what I mean by that. What I mean by that is, if you take all these different storylines and different scenes and different aspects and parts of the show, like the prison break in season 1 and the the bank heist and the different storylines in season 2 with like Mon Mothma and stuff like that. You take all these different things, they're good on their own. Like, if you take them out of context, it is very well acted, very well written, very intense. But if you put it in the context of a whole, of looking at the story of Andor as a whole, a lot of it feels like digression and unnecessary and just poor pacing, and like it doesn't like fit together in a very cohesive storyline. And some of it, as I said in season 1, a lot of it seemed unnecessary, and that could have been cut entirely. Even stuff I liked, like the prison stuff, like that ultimately was not necessary for the story. So that's my thoughts on Andor as a whole, is that the sum of its parts is greater than the whole. So I don't know if that speaks more ill or of the show or not. Maybe not. I don't know. But anyway, if I had to give a rating to season 2, which is tough, but I give my rating for season 2 as a whole, I think I am going to have to give it a 9 out of 10. A 9, excellent, because mainly on the strength of those, that third arc there, especially the Gorman Massacre and the follow-up with Mon Mothma escaping the Senate. Like, those are 2 of the best hours of TV ever. And so on that strength, I have to elevate it to at least a 9. Doesn't make it for a 10 because of the pacing being off, as I mentioned, and all the unnecessary shit they did in that first arc. And so, yeah, the pacing was still a bit off, and it didn't end in the best way possible. Like, I was thinking coming into this last arc that, if this ending is just as amazing, I'm giving this show a 10. but it wasn't. It had a lot of prequel-itis, and again, I'm sorry, poorly paced. You don't spend the third to last episode of a show called Andor with Andor not making an appearance, and focusing on a pretty minor character. So no, the pacing was off. So I can't give it a 10. But on the strength, and it's not like those are the only 2 good episodes of the season. Like, there are a lot of good stuff in the show. As I said, good character arcs, good moments, good character moments throughout the entire season. So, but those 2 episodes are just fucking amazing. So I will give season 2 of Andor a 9 out of 10. And that is it for my review of Andor season 2. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out my channel as I continue to cover Star Trek, mostly covering Star Trek every episode, 1 episode at a time. Currently in DS9 Season 4 and Voyager Season 2. So please check out my channel for that if you're so inclined, and many other videos and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.